How do you decide whether or not the company you're considering buying is a good one? And what information do you look for in a company that could indicate how its stock might perform? I'm Scott Connor, a 30-year veteran trader, and today you'll learn about fundamental analysis right here on Virtual Trade. Welcome to Virtual Trade. In this episode, we'll look at the information contained in the 3 financial statements and how financial ratios can be used to help an investor identify different strengths and weaknesses of a company on paper. Next, we'll look at how to easily find and break down this information. And finally, new trader Jenny Horne and I will continue the portfolio management process. Fundamental analysis is the process of examining a company's financial statements to help better determine the investment worthiness of a stock. Financial statements include balance sheets, income statements, and cash flow statements. Now, this information can be used to help determine the financial makeup of the company behind the stock. We'll focus on how fundamental analysis can be combined with these statements to better evaluate a company. Analyzing the fundamental strengths and weaknesses of a company can be likened to a shopper in the canned soup aisle of a grocery store. The shopper can read the list of ingredients to see what the soup is really made of. Likewise, a stock's list of ingredients is found in its financial statements. If our soup has too much sodium, it may not be a good sound choice. And if our stock has too much debt, it may not be a sound choice either. So you can see, ingredients should be the primary consideration in the purchasing decision. Now, let's take a closer look at the ingredients or financial statements of a company.
Let's start with a balance sheet. This document compares the company's current assets to its liabilities and owner's equity. Let's define these terms. First, we have assets, which are items the company owns. Assets are usually comprised of cash, equipment, and property. Next are liabilities. Liabilities are usually debts or accounts that need to be paid. Often, a liability on the balance sheet has an offsetting asset that helps the numbers stay level. For example, if a company were to take a loan out to buy a property, the loan would be a liability and the property would be an asset. The third term of a balance sheet is capital, or owner's equity, which is the amount of assets raised by issuing stock. For example, when a company issues stock either in its initial public offering or in a secondary offering, it raises money or capital that can be used to fund various business expenses. Balance is achieved when the value of the assets are equal to liabilities and owner's equity. The balance sheet helps you see how a company raises money for its assets and can help you determine if the company is overextended. However, if you want to know how the company earns money, you'd look at its income statement. An income statement shows a company's revenues and expenses. These are the costs associated with running the business, including operations, interest paid on loans, and taxes. When you take revenues and subtract expenses, you get net income. Net income is the earnings of a company. Earnings are usually handled in 2 ways. The first way is to share the earnings with shareholders by paying a dividend. The second way is to reinvest these earnings into the company. Reinvesting earnings can help a company's cash position. A company with a good cash position is usually better prepared to endure economic ups and downs. This is why some investors say cash is king. It's also why the cash flow statement is an important item to consider. This statement shows how the company uses its cash to operate the business and make investments. It also shows how much is borrowed from a bank or bondholder. These figures are totaled to show changes in the company's overall cash position. This statement is important because it gives a more detailed account of how the business generates revenue and is therefore much more difficult to manipulate than an income statement.
So to recap, there are 3 primary financial statements. The balance sheet compares a company's assets to its liabilities and the owner's equity. The income statement reports a company's revenues and expenses. And finally, the cash flow statement reveals a company's cash position. Now, let's take a look how financial ratios can simplify the process of fundamental analysis.
There are several ratios that can help an investor compare stocks, but we'll focus on one of the most common, the price to earnings, or PE ratio. Let's say you have one stock that's trading at $6 a share, another at $35 a share, and a third at $132 a share. How would you know which one is the best value? Some might assume the $6 stock is the best value because it's the cheapest. However, this might not be the case, because a company's value may depend largely on the company's earnings. The PE ratio allows you to look beyond the price of a stock to see which company could be the best value. To create this ratio, first divide the net income, or earnings, by the number of outstanding shares. This number is called earnings per share, or EPS. Next, divide the price of the stock by the EPS to get the PE ratio. The first company is trading at $6 and has an EPS of 20 cents, resulting in a PE of 30. The second company is trading at $35 a share and has an EPS of $1.40 for a PE of 25. The final company is trading at $132 per share and has an EPS of $3.90 for a PE of 34. Now you can better compare each company by its PE ratio. Despite the drastic difference in stock prices, all three companies have a similar valuation. However, the second company has the lowest PE ratio and may be the best value. Remember, a PE ratio is only one of several ratios that can be used. There are other ratios for determining valuation, profitability, and financial strength.
As we wrap up, it's important to remember, fundamental analysis is the process of using financial information to better evaluate potential stock purchases. Valuable financial information is found on the three financial statements: the cash flow, the balance sheet, and the income statement. Now, using financial ratios, such as the PE ratio, can help make the process of fundamental analysis even simpler. Welcome back. It's time for Tools of the Trade, where we look at various tools within TD Ameritrade, thinkorswim, and Mobile Trader. In this segment, we'll be focusing on finding fundamental information on TD Ameritrade website. So let's get started. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and jump into the tdameritrade.com website and go ahead and log in using the same username and login or password we would use on the thinkorswim platform. And we'll, on the landing page, first thing we're going to do is start off by entering a stock symbol. Now, in this particular case, we'll be looking at the banking sector. So let's go ahead and type in the symbol BAC. And you can see as we do that down below, Bank America is the stock we want to look at. So we'll just click on Bank America. That will load up right away, and we'll see the initial information on the Bank America stock. Now, first thing that we're looking at on the stock profile page, which is what opens up automatically once we click on that, is quite a bit of information. Now, a lot of this is fundamental information. There is some technical or chart information, but we'll take a look at both. On the right side, under Summary, we'll go down the second column here and start off with some of the important fundamental numbers that we want to follow with each individual stock, particularly when we're looking at stocks or considering different stocks for our Jenny's stock portfolio. Number one, market cap. How big is the company? Now, this number you can see is $300 billion. Now, that's calculated by taking the price of the stock multiplied times the number of shares outstanding, and that gives the capital weighting of a company. And we can compare the different companies in the different indices to sort of rank them so we can see what their market capitalization is, or exactly how big that stock is. Let's go down to the next one, which is earnings per share. Shares outstanding, 10.2 billion. But again, let's jump down to earnings per share. Now, what is earnings per share? Again, we've talked about this. This is the indicator that we use for stocks to determine how much money they're actually making. So if I'm a shareholder, for each share, how much are they earning as a company? Now, this number can be a positive or a negative number. In some cases, if the company's not making money, this could be a negative number. But again, that's one we follow very closely to see how a company's doing overall. Something that's important to point out is we jump into the software here. If you see something like earnings per share, you can go ahead and click on that and get a quick description of what is actually meant. Because you'll see, for example, under the earnings per share, you'll see TTM. And that's trailing 12 months that's determined, in this case, to decide or to calculate what the earnings are. So again, if you want to just go ahead and click on that, it'll give you a little bit more detail on what we're looking at. All right, so after earnings per share, let's take a look at the PE ratio. Again, another important number that we watch, and this one happens to be 14.9. Now, what is the PE ratio again? Well, it's the price of the stock divided by its earnings, right? Now, think about it. If I have a stock that's high in price, but is not having much earnings, that's going to be a big number, right? If I have something that's fairly in line with what we're seeing in the market these days, somewhere in the 15 to 16 to 17 rate, well, we can see Bank of America is about 14, 15, right in that range. So somewhere maybe towards the middle or lower end of the PE ratios for most stocks in the market that we're looking at. But remember, the price is over the earnings. Now, let's say, for example, we have a stock that's price is very high and the earnings are low. Well, either the earnings have to come up eventually, or the price is going to have to come down to match the earnings. That's why we watch this number so carefully. Next thing, let's look at dividend yield right after that. And you can see the dividend yield here about 1.6. That simply takes the dividend amount, which you can see right here, divides it by the price of the stock, and that will give us the yield. So they're paying about 48 cents a year in dividends. That's the annual dividend rate. And if you divide that by the stock price, you get about a 1.64 dividend yield. So that total payout in annual dividends is about 1.64% of the current stock price. Ex-dividend dates, very important. Now beta, how about beta? What does beta mean? Well, that's a number that's important as well, because if we want to know how our stock is moving in terms of volatility compared to the overall volatility of the market, that's a number that we can use here. So if you see the number 1.3, that gives us, well, let's make sure that is the number. Yeah, 1.3 on a beta. That means that if the market's moving at a 1% move, then we would expect to see about a 1.3 move in this particular stock. So a great number to just sort of get a relative idea of how this stock moves compared to the volatility of the market as a whole. Okay, so basically we've got done with that. Let's take a quick look at percent held by institutions. That's the last number here. And that shows that about 67% of this stock is held by institutions. So that gives you an idea how much is held by individuals as opposed to institutions as well. All right, so let's keep doing this. Let's jump over to the next tab, which in this case is going to be fundamentals. So I'm going to jump over here to fundamentals, and we can see some good information on the stock itself. Now remember, we looked at something like this earlier on the thinkorswim platform, and this is a nice complement to some of the information, fundamental information we can find on the thinkorswim platform. You can see, first of all, you get a company profile, right? That's just details on the business lines or a summary of how this company earns or where it earns its revenue, what kind of businesses it is in. Let's scroll down just a little bit lower and take a look at some of the other important information. Now, let's take a look at some of the historic growth details. Here, just running through quickly, you can see the earnings per share growth. Now, this is over 5 years, is growing at about a 46% rate. Its revenues, not so fast. It's not growing as fast as the earnings are. The dividends have been growing over the last 5 years about 57%. So this gives us a nice sort of long-term look at how the company is moving. Let's keep moving down a little bit lower and go down to what we call the financial statements of the stock. And you can see some histograms that are jumping out here. And we're looking at the three principal reports that we're looking at. Number one, balance sheet, of course, income statement and cash flow. We've talked about these. And again, if you want some more information, just click on balance sheet, for example. That will take you to a more detailed layout of the balance sheet of Bank of America in this case. Now we can really dig into cash due from banks, interest rate deposits, net loans, et cetera, et cetera. We can go down and look at liabilities. You know, that's money that's owed out, shareholder equity. There's a lot of good information that we can dig into here as well. Let's go back to the main page just by clicking on the back button. And again, let's make a little bit of a comparison here. As you can see, over the last 5 years, the net loans or the balance sheet, you can see how that number's moved. Let's look at the income statement. We can see after loan loss provisions, how the stock has been doing, and of course cash flow from operations, you can see is actually dropped a little bit lower each year in for Bank America. So again, important numbers. Let's jump over to another tab I think that's very important, that's called peer comparisons. Now this is a great little tool here that takes the stock Bank America, which we're looking at, and compares it to 2 or 3 other stocks in the same sector. So let's see how this particular company is doing against its peers. So as we take a look here, let's scroll down just a little bit. You can see that we have Bank America here, and what it's done is it went ahead and shows JP Morgan and Citigroup as 2 other stocks to compare with. Number 1, you'll have a chart that'll show up with the corresponding color. So Bank America is the black line, JP Morgan the blue, and Citigroup the purple. And you can see that for 1 month that they're about the same, but Bank America is leading a little bit. But if we'd like to get some more historic technical analysis of the companies, take a quick look. Over 5 years, you can see the black line, which is Bank America, is started to move a little bit ahead of the other 2 stocks. So that's a great way to take a quick snapshot look at how the stock is doing on a chart. Now down below, you have a summary of more detailed information. Market capitalization. We started off by talking how big a company is. Well, you can compare to the other 2 peers, and you can see that all 3 of these actually are at the high end of their industry. That's why you get this nice little icon here that pops up here to give you an idea how they compare to the whole industry. Beta, again, 1.3, 1.2, 1.5, and again, that's rather high for its entire sector. Dividend yield, you can see somewhat on the lower end, mid to lower end of dividend yield, 1.6, 2.0, 1.9, and the PE ratios, 15, 14, 11. As a group, in general, those are a little bit lower than the industry group or the sector itself. And you can continue down a little bit lower and get some more information about revenues, profit margins, and other earnings information. So this is a great first look at some of the fundamental and a little bit of the technical tools available on tdameritrade.com. Now don't forget, for more information on these tools and other great education, visit the Education Center on tdameritrade.com. Welcome back to Virtual Trade. I'm joined by trader Jenny Horne. Jenny, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
This is fun. We're going to have a lot of fun looking at individual stocks in your portfolio. But today what we're going to be doing is going from the thinkorswim platform to the tdameritrade.com website.
I've never been there before, so I do have a lot to learn here.
Okay, great, because there's a lot there that can complement what we've seen on the thinkorswim platform. So what we're going to do is we're going to look about or understand how to use analyst reports from tdameritrade.com.
Right, okay, I'm excited.
All right, so let's do this. What we've done, Jenny, as you can see on the screen, we've already logged in. We went to tdameritrade.com, logged in using our username and password, same as we do for thinkorswim.
Okay.
And we're on my account. But to get to this, we need to go to research and ideas. So Jenny, I'm going to have you go ahead and just drive the mouse here.
Okay, and just to be clear, Scott,
okay,
this is now you just logged in from the website. So this is where it takes you.
This is exactly where you will land at tdameritrade.com.
Okay,
and then,
great.
Again, exactly, just log in. All right, now drop straight down and you'll see Analyst Reports, and go ahead and just click on that. All right, now give it a second, and what it's doing is it's going to download the different analyst reports, and of course then it will ask us for a symbol. But you can see right now we haven't put a symbol in, and it's already giving us some reports. So these reports that come up initially without even putting in a symbol are just general market commentary, some other sort of pertinent news of things that are happening in the marketplace.
Great, so we want to talk more specific one in my portfolio, correct?
Exactly. So on the upper right-hand corner, let's go ahead and change it from keyword to symbol, because we're going to use a stock symbol. And tell you what, why don't we start off with one of the stocks in your portfolio? How about Disney?
Great.
D-I-S. And then we'll search for Disney. Now, the first thing that comes up is you can see there's quite a bit, or quite a few of the third-party analyst reports, and you can see on the left side, they're all in PDF format.
Right, and I mean, there's 72, there's a ton to get through.
There's 72, so if we'd like to scroll down a little bit, and you have particular third-party providers you'd rather watch, you're certainly able to do that. So why don't we scroll this down and take this list from 72 to something a little smaller. Maybe in that first group, let's pick maybe Forward Equity Research. We'll look at them and just take everything else out. And then we'll see what they come up with in the analyst reports for Disney.
Yeah, I really like using filters because I think this is a little bit overwhelming because there's so much information, but I
Absolutely.
think this will help narrow it down.
And you'll discover over time that there may be certain providers or third-party analysts that you get used to or like to use. All right, so now we're down to just 5. So let's take maybe the second one there where it says Forward Equity Research Walt Disney. Perfect.
Okay.
And that was just this week, or actually June 15th. So it looks like they come out with this pretty much once a week. All right, so now we're actually getting into the Analyst Report itself. And again, there's quite a bit here. So let's just start at the very, very top. We have Disney. You can see we verified that. Just below Disney, I'll hold my mouse over here right now. It gives an overall rating. And that rating happens to be 1, which is the highest rating. It goes from 1 as highest to 5 as lowest.
Okay.
Okay, so far so good. It also gives us a little bit about what this particular analyst is feeling about the stock. So you can read through here at this particular time, it's giving us sort of a synopsis of how they feel about the stock.
Right, and it's strongly outperform is something I recognize. 'Cause analyst ratings are something you hear about often that move the stock. So outperform is doing pretty well.
Right, and Jenny, also, if you take a look here, it's rated 1 now, but if you look down below, it gives you the previous rating. So you can see if there's been any change between the previous rating and where it is now.
So you can see it was upgraded recently.
Yes, absolutely. Moved from 2 to 1. So for them, for this analyst group, it's moving in the right direction for them. All right, now down below, there's a couple important factors we look at. Now, we spoke a little bit about, we've seen stocks on charts, but we also talked about fundamentals. What drives a stock? Where does their money come from in revenue? And so they have 3 groupings here you can see. One is earnings strength, then relative valuation, of course, and then price movement. Now, earnings is obviously very, very important. That's what a company actually makes, right? So that's an important number, and we talk about that all the time. EPS, earnings per share. So that's an important one. How are they rating that one?
Very positive.
Okay, so they're positive there. Let's look at the next group. What about relative to others? It's relative.
Also positive.
Very positive. How about the last one on the far right, the price movement?
Negative. What I like the most about these 3 things is it gives you, even if you didn't understand what those necessarily meant, it goes in beneath to kind of explain why they're giving that rating.
Right. That's a great point, Jenny, because if you just look at the charts, you get a quick synopsis, but if you read it underneath, you'll get a lot more clarity or detail, if you will. Now, down below, it talks about Walt Disney, what kind of company it is. And I think the next thing that I think that a lot of people like to look at is the peer comparison, right? So in other words, how is Disney doing to others in its same group?
Right. And I also think this is useful because a company like Disney, we know they're competitors, but sometimes with smaller companies that I may not know a lot about or someone may not know a lot about, this is a great way to see who they compete against and tell you a little bit more about them.
And so what do you think? Take a look at the overall rating of Disney. We know what that is. It's 1. The other peers in the other group are actually just a 1 notch below at the 2 level. Now, if you keep going across there, you can also see price moves, market cap, earnings per share, price over earnings ratios. You get a lot of things here you can compare between these 4. CBS, for example, Discovery. There's a pretty good comparison there. All right, well, Jenny, let's keep going and scroll down just a little bit further and see what else we get. When you get down to this area, it takes those 3 segments that we just talked about and, like you said, gives us more detail. So if you take a look here, you get a recommendation summary from the company itself, and this is probably a pretty important one to go to as well. This kind of sums up how they feel about the company Disney.
Yeah, this is really useful. And this is the kind of thing where I think initially these seem really overwhelming, but actually once you read them, they're broken down in super layman's terms, and I think they make a lot of sense.
Right, now, and as a matter of fact, up above we saw the 3 groups that they focus in on to rate the stock. Now down below you can see, again, same, we're looking at earnings strength again, gives you much more detail, put some histograms, some bar charts, and again, just breaks down the earnings growth or strength, if you will, in more detail. And if you keep scrolling down, Jenny, you'll see that they do the same thing for the other 2 categories. The relative valuation, I'll keep scrolling, and of course about the price movement. And now we did see it was a little bit negative on the price movement, and again, you can read through here as to see why. It shows you charts and really shows you that maybe the stock hasn't moved as high as they may expect for the earnings and the other information.
Right, yeah, I mean, I think this is great, and I'm someone who loves to follow earnings, so this kind of breaks down where their trends are going and where they've been, so that's fascinating to me.
Okay, well, Jenny, that wraps up our session on looking at third-party analyst reports through the tdameritrade.com website. So what'd you think?
I thought this was great. I think it kind of paints a picture of where a company has been, where it's going, and I think this is something that's definitely useful if you want to know more about the company.
All right, great. So we know where to go to get more fundamentals from now on. All right, well, thanks a lot, Jenny, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Scott.
In this episode, we examined the 3 financial statements and how using financial ratios can facilitate the process of fundamental analysis. We also identified some important financial information and continued the portfolio management process with Jenny Horne. I'm Scott Connor, and thanks for watching Virtual Trade.